With a recent report that Tesla might in fact be going back to using radar again, the interwebs have been completely ablaze with people saying that Elon Musk and company have made a huge mistake and now they're admitting they're wrong. But the reality is much more nuanced than that. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So as I'm sure a lot of you who follow Tesla and Tesla news have heard, Tesla has filed for an extension to a confidentiality clause into January so that they don't lose their competitive advantage. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second, and we'll have an article from Not a Tesla App about that. But first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about mistakes. I think it's very much worth noting the fact that mistakes are a good thing, and mistakes is an unfortunate linguistic aberration. In my mind, like when I talk to students, when I teach them, I always tell them that the only thing that success can do is reinforce what they already know. It's actually failure that actually drives things forward, right? It's making a mistake. It's not doing something perfectly that can really teach you something new. And that is much more important and crucial than doing something right the first time. So I think it's important to just kind of contextualize all of this in the fact that when Elon Musk and Tesla, or Twitter for that matter, because he talks about how they're going to make mistakes in Twitter, how when they do something and it doesn't work right and they change directions, that's not a bad thing. It's a learning experience. It's a way for them to understand better how something works. So I just want to put this in context. But with that caveat aside, I think that what they're looking at here is HD radar, which is a very different beast than traditional radar. And because of this, I believe that the actual steps involved have actually been a learning experience and have been crucially beneficial to the way that Tesla is going to be able to implement full self-driving in the future. All right, so enough of this preamble. Let's start with this Not a Tesla App article here, which is from December 7th, which is yesterday as I record this. Anyway, you can see that there's an authorization letter from Tesla asking that the Federal Communications Commission keep some exhibits held in confidentiality for another 60 days until February 7th of 2023. So that's just about 2 months from now. And what it sounds like from what everybody's talking about and from the identification of this model number is that this is a radar unit that could very well be put in the new Tesla Model 3 and or many other Tesla models. Supposedly there's a new Tesla Model 3 codenamed Highland that's coming out as well. All rumors at this point, so don't trust any of this stuff. But the upshot of this specific authorization letter, this request, is that a new radar model might well end up in Teslas in January sometime. And I'm not going to go through this article word for word, but you can see here Tesla requested more time for details to be kept confidential in a document dated November 18th and which appeared on Twitter on December 6th. Weirdly enough, it's coincidental. It appeared on Twitter on December 6th and the request is to February 7th. So as I noted, it's a 60-day extension that they're requesting. And the model number, the thing that they're requesting the confidentiality for is this part number 1541584. And you'll notice the exhibits that they want to keep confidential here are a user manual, internal photos, external photos, and test setup photos. And if you don't know, also there have been some rumored pictures of Teslas that have been driving around, I believe, in the San Francisco Bay Area with parts of them covered, and that there's some evidence that there might even be more cameras involved. That would be a whole different thing. I'm not going to talk about ultrasonic sensors today, but it is part of the sensor suite that was removed. So over time, like my 2021 Model Y has cameras, it has low definition radar, regular radar, and it has ultrasonic sensors. The current Model Ys that are being released right now have only cameras. And there's some indication that they might need more cameras if they're not going to use ultrasonic sensors, specifically in the very front of the vehicle, because it's very difficult for the vehicle to see very, very close by as it's pulling into a parking place or something. Anyway, the person who leaked this on Twitter reached out to Green the Only, and Green the Only, if you don't know, is fantastic. You should follow him for sure. His response to this was something potentially major planned for mid-January, which is just a bit over a month away, like something that coincides with a sensor suite change. So of course, the obvious thing is that this potentially opens the door for the return of radar. And there are other people who've noted that the part number is actually a radar unit. I have not confirmed that myself, but that's what people have said. So take that with a grain of salt unless you confirm it yourself. But anyway, people have said that that is actually a radar unit. And that's the reason for all of this brouhaha. Also down at the bottom here, there's been a lot of speculation about hardware 4, which it is time for Tesla to release hardware 4 in their new cars. That would be an upgraded board with a new chipset and also upgraded cameras and potentially, like I said, radar units. So that's the setup. So what is this radar unit, and why am I saying that this is not them just backtracking and going back to exactly what they had before? Well, the kind of radar that we were talking about before is what's called regular or low definition radar. And the new version that they're looking at putting in is an HD radar, which is a really, really different beast than the old radar, like the one that's in my vehicle. So this is an article from about a year and a half ago, but basically the technology is becoming more commercializable at this point, but the technology has been around for a while because it takes a while for people to be able to ramp up production of these things. Also, I want to note that SIVA is a company that makes sensor fusion suites. In other words, they make the back end to allow you to make radar and vision systems work together. So there is a vested interest in them, talking excitedly about this, but this is a pretty good article. It really just kind of goes through the advantages of HD radar over regular and why you would want to consider using it in an automotive sensor suite. So Nir Shapira, who is the author of this, begins with talking about L2+. And if you don't know the 5 levels of autonomy, actually 6 because there is level 0. Anyway, I'll put a link to that up above if you're interested in checking that out. I did a whole video on that. But level 2 is basically a driver assist systems. Level 3 is like a hands-off kind of system, but you still have to be paying attention. And then briefly, level 4 is really hands-off, like you can basically go to sleep in the car, but it only works under certain conditions. And level 5 is like the car just drives itself under any conditions, snow, rain, whatever, dark of night, things like that. So that is a far, far away. What we're looking at, the kind of golden opportunity here is that level 3, level 4. And what Nir is talking about here is an L2+, which is like not quite level 3, but almost level 3. So maybe L2.5 might be another way of putting this. So we get to the question of why radar is important for L2+. So L2+, which would be L3, L4, L5, requires aggressive target failure rates. What that means is that you can't miss anything. We talk about precision and recall all the time in the false negatives. The thing you really, really can't do with a sensor suite when you're doing driving is miss something. So that could be a human being standing in the road. It could be a car in front of you. It could be a deer running across the road, a piece of garbage lying in the road, all of that kind of stuff. The car has to detect and it has to avoid that. And it really can't miss those things. So his aggressive target failure rate means like very, very low failure rate. So he talks here about LiDAR as well, and I know a lot of people know about LiDAR also, and many people say that you can't do full self-driving without LiDAR, but LiDAR is very expensive and it's also very fragile, and it also really doesn't give you much of an advantage over vision because it can be blocked by rain and fog and snow, etc., which is the main advantage of radar. It can operate, if it's just completely dark outside, you don't even have your headlights on, the radar can still see things in front of you, as can FLIR, which is forward-looking infrared, and I know Sandy Monroe is all about that. But HD radar can fulfill a lot of the same things that FLIR can. So anyway, beyond expensive with LiDAR, obviously you get the ranging stuff, but Tesla's basically figured that out with their camera system. So they don't really need LiDAR at all anymore. That's not to say that other companies might not, but they can toss that, but they have not resolved all of the issues that a high definition radar can solve for you. So then we get into the meat of this blog, which is the really important part, which is the difference between regular radar and HD radar. As he says, the challenge for radar has been resolution. Standard products offer 12 channels, which is basically kind of 12 frequencies if you want to think about it. It basically blocks everything out into 12 buckets. And if you imagined that your vision, you could only see 12 levels of brightness of something, right? So you take a black and white photo and divide it into 12 black and whitenesses, you can't see an awful lot of detail. It's an analogous way of thinking about it. That's not exactly the way it works, but if you can kind of wrap your head around that idea of something that's super, super low resolution. So again, traditional radar only has 12 channels, which again is good enough for short range. In other words, we have our Mazda CX-5, which has this whole thing. If you get too close to a car in front of you, it will kick on the emergency brakes because it's got a radar system that's like, whoops, I'm traveling, only a couple of meters away and I've got a pretty significant difference in velocity between myself and the car in front of me, so I better brake. So it's good for those sort of situations, but it's not good for looking far away. It's not good for high detail things, and therefore it's not really a replacement for vision or LiDAR. And that takes us to HD radar, which, as you might imagine, what it has is it delivers hundreds to thousands of channels rather than 12. So essentially you've got a much more high resolution, fine-grained image. And it's not just like the brightness or something like that. It's also velocity values, distance values. It's got a lot more resolution in that. So if you think about it, you've got kind of a cube that this thing is sitting in. So So you've got the radar unit, and then this actually it's a cone, probably not a cube, but it broadcasts this out, and you get this 3-dimensional area, but it also includes velocity, so it's actually 4-dimensional. So that's great. As you approach a car from behind, it's telling you what your relative velocity is, and it really knows that through Doppler shifting. So it's very, very accurate. And Tesla's worked very hard to get their vision system to do pseudo LiDAR / pseudo radar, but it's really difficult to do. Radar just gets this for free. So it gets that sort of bouncing thing, but the hundreds to thousands of channels gives you much, much higher resolution. And that's the difference between regular old school radar and this new HD radar. And also the reason why Tesla might want to consider putting HD radar back in the cars now, because it's not going backwards to the old version of radar and admitting they were wrong. What it is more like an evolution, right? It's they went from old radar plus vision to just vision to now vision plus a new higher resolution radar, which really can come in under certain circumstances like heavy rain or fog or very dark night or snow or things like that. It can see through these things, whereas a vision system really can't. And you can kind of make a vision system work with that, but it's really hard to make it work like perfectly with that. So these are the situations where this HD radar could really come in handy. So anyway, he discusses how they need beamforming technologies and things like that from cellular communication. And then they use a CFAR system to declutter the signal so you get a higher signal to noise ratio. And then of course you need to convert this raw information to a point cloud, a cloud of things that are around you. And that requires intensive computations to create the 4D cube. Again, it's a 3D spatial cube plus velocity, so it gives you a 4D cube. And then of course on the back end, you've got the post-processing and the image recognition and things like that, scene segmentation, tracking, classification of targets, et cetera, et cetera. This is all stuff that Tesla is very familiar with from doing their vision systems. So if they can get this HD radar that's very, very similar to a visual image, they should be able to integrate this much, much better than the old low resolution radar. And then I want to touch on this Autocar article as well, because I think it is important. There are some real downsides to traditional radar. And one of the really big problems with it is that it doesn't do elevation very well. So in other words, it doesn't understand when something is on the ground versus up in the air. And this has actually caused accidents in the past. So essentially what will happen is, let's say that there's a truck across the road or something, the car will be driving and the radar system will kick in and say like, I think it's flat, it's not moving. And so I'm going to guess that it's a bridge, because it really doesn't understand. Again, remember, traditional radar is very low resolution. So if it sees a bridge, something that goes across the road, it doesn't have a good way of differentiating that between something that's sitting on the road and something that's up there. But 99% of the time, it's going to be a bridge if it sees something like that. So it goes like, oh, that must be a bridge because that's what I see almost 100% of the time. But then in this one instance, there's a truck across the road and the car doesn't recognize that and drives right into the truck. And this has happened in the past, including to Tesla. And so this is a very, very serious problem. So in this highlighted part, we see radar, on the other hand, as opposed to LiDAR, isn't affected by rain or fog, and radar sensors for cars are cheap. So that's nice. HD, not so much, but again, you're looking at a $50,000 plus car. So including something that's a little more expensive is not that big a deal, and you only need one HD radar system, not multiple ones. However, it's so far a low resolution technology, again, traditional radar, capable of only creating a simple set of visual points to represent objects it detects. It's also not good at dealing with different elevations, so again, bridges versus cars. And while it is good at detecting and ranging moving objects, so things that are moving approximately the same speed at you, it struggles with stationary ones. And that has to do a lot with the resolution of the radar. Again, if it's only got 12 channels, it's only got so many buckets to put things in. So it's bad at recognizing what obviously to us human beings are just stationary things like garbage cans or trees or bridges or things like that. So it's poor at recognizing that kind of stuff. And I'll go ahead and read this highlighted part because I think this is actually really, really useful. And I'll put a link to all of these articles in the description so you can check them out on your own time. All right, high definition radar is capable of generating far more detailed point clouds than the basic technology. Israeli company Arbe, I assume that's how you pronounce it, has succeeded in developing a high definition imaging radar that claims claims it has the potential to lift the technology from a supportive role to a backbone of the sensing suite. The basis of the new chipset is a type of radar called frequency modulated continuous wave, or FMCW. And while that isn't in itself new, Arbe has developed an enhanced version to produce high definition 4-dimensional images. So again, that's that 3D cube plus the 4th dimension, which is velocity. Frequency modulated means the system changes frequency while it's working, so it's constantly switching frequency that is broadcasting out so that it can avoid interference from other radar systems, right? So you don't want that. That's a really big problem. If somebody shines radar at you, you want to not think that that's your own radar system bouncing a signal back. Again, the way radar works, right? It sends out a pulse, it hits something, it bounces back again. The time tells you how far away it is, and the Doppler shift tells you how fast it's moving relative to you. So anyway, you don't want interference because you don't want it thinking some other signal that's being sent out is the signal that you sent out. So this frequency modulation is very important to that system. The system can see up to 300 meters away for larger objects, and that's really, really useful. Tesla's system back at AI Day 2022 was about 120 meters for the cube that it had with their vision system. So this is about 3x further than that, although I believe the 10.69.3.1 or 3.2, whatever system we're using right now, I think that that's resolved some of those issues. But anyway, 300 meters is a long ways away, and it allows the car to behave in a much more elegant manner. So again, remember that traditional radar, we're talking about short range stuff just a few meters away. Here we're talking about 300 meters or 3 football fields away, so it can see far, far away. It can detect a motorcycle at 250 meters and a child at more than 150 meters. So all of these are distances that even if you're driving at highway speed, you'll be able to take, adequate steps to slow down gracefully rather than having to do emergency maneuvers because you're seeing things so far away. It also covers a wide field of view, can cope with different elevations, and can detect hundreds of objects rather than around 32 for conventional radar. So again, much more dense point cloud, much higher resolution. That's the advantage that it has. Arbe says that 2 or 3 of its radar sensors and 8 cameras will do the same job as 10 conventional radar sensors, 6 LiDAR sensors, and 12 cameras. It consumes far less energy than LiDAR-based systems, which is good for EVs, and costs around 77 pounds, or let's say, 80 or $100 per sensor in mass production volumes, compared to tens of thousands of dollars for LiDAR-based sensing systems. So they note 3 radar sensors and 8 cameras. In the case of Tesla, they've already got the 8 cameras. I expect that they might only use one of these or maybe 2, but maybe they'll put a couple in the front and one in the back or something like that. So anyway, as Arbe says, you've got 3 of these sensors and 8 cameras would do the same job as a much, much more expensive and well tricked out automobile. All right, so why am I calling this evolutionary rather than a mistake and Tesla having to go back? Well, the obvious thing is that they're going from regular low-resolution radar, which was problematic in the extreme, to this HD radar, which is actually a pretty good complement to vision and works specifically in situations where vision is poor. In other words, things like really dark, heavy rain, snow, fog, things like that. The radar just cuts right through all of that stuff and is no problem. It also is probably going to be good when the sun is very, very low in the sky, because even though the sun projects out, beams of all different frequencies, this frequency modulation system, because this is active rather than passive, it's beaming things out, and so it knows what to expect back again. Whereas a vision system that's passive is only receiving information, so it doesn't have any a priori knowledge about what it is that it should be seeing. And so our HD radar system should not have nearly as much trouble with low sun angles, and that will be a big advantage too. So it's not just things like darkness and stuff, it can also be when headlights of other vehicles are shining at you, or especially when the sun is at a low angle and coming right in. The times when you have to lower down your screen so because you can't see as a human being. Those are also times that the camera system is going to be extremely challenged. And now let's talk about the evolutionary process a bit and why this is actually a really, really good thing. So Tesla, like I said, originally had ultrasonic sensors, they had cameras, and they had radar. And then they got rid of the radar, and then they got rid of the ultrasonic sensors, and now they may well be putting the radar back in again. And by the way, the radar could probably take the place of the ultrasonic sensors depending on where it is. It might be able to do the parking and stuff like that, right? Because if it's high resolution, it will be able to see things close up and know whether you're getting close to a curb or whether there's a child in front front of you or something like that, that the cameras can't see because of the slope of the hood or something, right? So the radar could be useful in those situations as well and could easily take the place of ultrasonic sensors. But why didn't Tesla just keep the old version of radar until they could directly replace it with this? I think this is actually a really important lesson. So what happened was when Elon Musk and Andrej Karpathy et al. Saw the fact that they were depending on radar as a crutch, they were using it too much so that their visual neural network systems were not as good as they thought they were. So analogously, a child might think that they were really good at bicycling, but they've got training wheels on their bicycle and they don't realize that they're using those training wheels a lot. And so they're not actually nearly as good at cycling as they thought they were. And then when the parents say like, time to take the training wheels off, the kid falls over a few times, right? And then they figure out that they have to get a lot better. So that's basically what happened with Tesla. They were like, they thought that they had a really good visual neural network system, but it turned out that the radar system was supporting it and was acting like a crutch. And when they got rid of that, their abilities fell way, way down, and they had to make their neural network systems much, much better. So that goes back to what I was talking about at the very beginning about the mistakes and the errors not being a bad thing. It's actually good to have this happen. If they just kept the old radar system and then swapped it directly out with HD radar when it was available, they would never have learned and improved their visual network systems. So that mistake was actually amazingly important and has allowed them to get the visual systems much, much further along. And if and when, again, this is all rumors at this point, but if and when the HD radar system gets incorporated in the vehicle again, they will have a much better ability to be able to integrate these things. They'll have a really good visual basis, and then they can use the HD radar in situations where it is advantageous to use that. And the sensor fusion issue will not be nearly as big a deal. Number one, because it's much higher resolution, so you won't have this low res, high res sensor fusion issue. But number two, because they already have such a good vision system installed that they can utilize that as their basis and then just add the radar on top as icing on the cake, or for specific circumstances where they're driving in poor conditions. So if you hear people in the news talking about how Tesla's made massive mistakes and they're having to go back and admit they were wrong and all of this stuff, number one, mistakes not bad. It's a really good learning experience. But number two, this is an evolution, not a going backwards. So it's actually going in a path like this, not going back to where they came from. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking. It was a little longer than I expected it to be, but I hope it was useful and it really helps you understand what's going on and the reason why Tesla might actually consider putting HD radar in their systems as opposed to the old radar, which they definitely needed to get rid of. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, please do like it so other people can find it, and also, of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. And if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.